First topic we're getting into here in world history is we're starting the South Asia unit. But with all of the units in world history, we're going to start in the far distant past and work our way up to the more modern. So this lecture today is going to kind of situate really everything, because we're going to be going back to the foundations of civilization, the earliest humans, and how that process, that transition comes about. So I want to start with a really visualization of how all of human history can be organized. And this is a bewildering process. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to be exploring in world history, but I want to provide for you kind of the scaffolding to hang all of this new knowledge you're going to be encountering on. It's been argued by some historians that all of human history could fall into three distinct eras, and one of them is overwhelmingly longer than the others. The first era of human history I'm going to put out there is what's commonly called the hunter-gatherer era. This is dominated by the hunting of animals and following animals where they go, the gathering of food and materials that you can pull from the forest or the fields, but there's no farming. There's no domestication of animals during this period. But this is by far the longest. This is how human beings lived the longest. From about 200,000 BCE, it's estimated by anthropologists and archaeologists, to somewhere around 10,000 to 8,000 BCE, before the Common Era. That's the academic terminology there, sometimes referred to as before the Christian era. That's the hunter-gatherer era. Following animal herds, gathering what you can from the forests and the fields, but no farming. Stone and wood tools, that's it. No metals, no fossil fuels, no complex structures, just hunting and gathering. But a transition happens to break humanity out of this pretty reliable cycle, or at least it was consistent, it was lasting throughout time. And this transition is commonly called the Neolithic Revolution. I underlined this, I bolded this. This is something you want to be aware of. The Neolithic Revolution is a term to describe the switch from hunting and gathering to farming. And not just farming, but also the domestication or the raising of animals. The idea that you bring in goats, sheep, chickens, cows, horses eventually, dogs, into your living arrangements. And you can use them for labor or for food. And then also in the Neolithic Revolution, it's the move and the adaptation to metal tools. First bronze, but then a variety of other metals and alloys can be used for precise cutting and all sorts of other needs that humanity can develop. And it begins a new era once this Neolithic Revolution is underway. It begins this new era known as the agrarian era, where life is geared around growing food, agriculture. Life is built around farming. It lasts a pretty long time, but not nearly as long as the previous, from about 8,000 BC until just about 300 years ago, around the year 1750. 1750 CE, the Common Era, or otherwise known as AD, 1750 AD. There's more food production during this time period because people can grow crops in great numbers. You're no longer hunting and gathering. And that's good. More calories, more energy. You can feed more people. The population's probably going to go up a tick or two. There's going to be conflict over land for sure, because once you start growing food on valuable plots of land, it doesn't take that much imagination to realize that human beings are going to clash over land. Valuable land versus less valuable land. But there's going to be a surplus food production. This is a bolded and underlined term here. More food than you need. You can take in all of that grain from the fields, and you can eat some of it, and you can store some of it away. Silos and mills, and feed large numbers of people through long stretches of time. And this is when the first civilizations are going to emerge. And since I use that term here, I want you to be conscious of what it means. One way of thinking of the meaning of civilization, it means a complex and organized society. No longer just small bands of hunters and gatherers, but increasingly larger and larger settlements. People are divided in many different civilizations are going to emerge during this time. And then the final era of human history is known as the Industrial Era. Runs from about 1750 CE or AD, right, just the decades right before the founding of the United States, 1776. Talked about this in US 1. That's kind of the beginnings, the dawn of the Industrial Era in a lot of ways. To the present day, it's argued. This is characterized by things like fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas, unlocking those large volumes of energies to power machines and to accomplish great tasks like the construction of skyscrapers and building of huge canals and waterways. Electricity to power motors and engines to accomplish all things from automobiles to the first light bulbs. Mass production, the reliability and consistency that we have today, that if you walk into a store and buy an object that was mass produced, you know you could do it in any other city around. And it's been argued by some observers that maybe we're even emerging into a new era. And this is an interesting question that I'd like to pursue later with some of you. Has the industrial era come to an end? Are things like the internet and mass communication that we enjoy today and experience today, is that changing how we live in such fundamental ways that we're even getting away from this, where you'd almost have to create a new era? The world's population, I think this is a good way to visualize how this transition takes place. This is 2.5 million years ago, far on the x-axis. The year 2025 is on the far right axis. Y-axis here is billions of people alive on planet Earth. This was the Neolithic Revolution, right around here. Slight uptick. Growing of food kind of boosts the population, but nowhere significant to, say, the Industrial Revolution, which is a concept we'll talk about later, or the formation of modern medicine, vaccines, and antibiotics, which over the past 150 years has caused our population to surge to nearly 8 billion. So that's a way to kind of visualize these three eras of history. So I have a group question for us, and this is where I'm going to expect that you guys are going to be interactive here. Proceed with the expectation that you're going to be called upon. What words or concepts or ideas do we associate with the term civilization? Do you hear the term civilization spoken by someone or on TV or some other situation? What ideas or words do we associate? Take 30 seconds, think about this. Everybody should have at least one word in mind if you're called upon to share ideas. Word we associate with civilization. Megan Farkas. What do you say? Not here? Sorry, bad draw here. All of the options. Let's see here. Annika Tordson. Developed. Okay, the idea that something is progressing or improving. Mr. Ellenbecker, got another name? Let's go up here back by me. Madeline Bijak. Okay, so you associate civilization as a term actually from the past, but because that's when they first emerged, you could say. Sure, I get that. Jacob Sabula, what do you think? Stability. Why do you say stability? I think that's an interesting term. I picked that term too, but I'm curious why. Didn't mean to press you, but thought you might have an explanation. Okay, yeah, that's a fair way of describing it. It's stable, it's reliable. We built all this stuff. It's probably not going to go away. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fair way of proceeding. We'll come back to that in a bit. So, how do civilizations develop? What are some of the processes that go along with that? So, what I want to present to you here in this slide is where it happens. Short answer to that question is the first human civilizations, they all happen in the same type of place. They happen happen in river valleys. River valleys is going to be very key to the location of civilizations. For one, river valleys are loaded with fertile land. It's one of those places on the Earth's surface that naturally replenishes its soil. You don't have to have some complex fertilizing operation to constantly rejuvenate the soil. The composition changes of the soil because rivers flood and they change the type of soil. So you can go back every season and plant crops there and they'll grow. They're at a similar latitude, meaning the location on the Earth's surface, north or south. So they have reliable weather conditions, or at least predictable weather conditions, that if you plant at this time of year, you can be reasonably confident that a plant will mature and grow and be harvested at another time of year. That's an important thing. And then finally, transportation is going to be really key to why river valleys are going to be a natural magnet for civilizations. And that is, in the ancient world, and really up until railroads and automobiles, it is always easier to float something than to move it on land. So boats, as a way of moving materials around, are going to be a natural draw. Civilization requires a more stationary lifestyle. You stay in one place. That's actually one of the pluses to civilization. You don't have to follow animal herds great lengths, traverse mountain ranges, and move in small packs of people because that's all you can carry. That's all that can be reliably moved. You can now stay in one place. You can grow your numbers. You can build permanent structures that don't go away. You can construct and you can regulate what is called irrigation. Irrigation, a term at the heart of all farming. It's the capturing and directing of water to crop production. If you can divert water from point A to point B now becomes a potential area for growing land or growing crops. If you live in a river valley, you constantly have a flow of water, and it just becomes a matter of digging those ditches or canals and maximizing your food production. The division of labor, a term in economics here, but it basically means the separation of tasks for the purposes of efficiency, for the purpose of getting more things done in a productive fashion. So maybe one group of your people can be employed in just digging those irrigation ditches so you can get water to new areas of land. Maybe another group can be just for farming and growing that particular crops. Another group is focused on maybe herding a flock of goats or some other domesticated livestock. Another group maybe protects the land. Another group maybe organizes and keeps records. You can think of how all of those forms of labor could be divided up. Kind of a follow-up concept to that is something called specialization, focusing on one skilled task. One of the things people find out when they start staying in one place is that if they can focus on a particular task and do just that, they can become more efficient at it, they can be more creative with it. We talked about how one of the things in the Neolithic Revolution was the forging of metal tools. If you can focus just on making metal tools, just imagine how much better they can become day after day, year after year of that person doing it, or other people doing it as well. Farming, same thing, specializing in your skill. Protection from outsiders. If you invest all of your livelihood in the growing of crops and the use of land, you better be prepared to defend that land. There's a large amount of life now is going to be geared around maintaining and protecting land for the purpose of food production. So, if there's a threat from an outsider group, you're going to have to be able to defend your territory. So it means there's going to be a motivation for leaders and people to form things like standing armies now that land for farming has to be protected. Taxation. Since you're going to be developing and tearing up the soil and moving stuff around and having permanent structures, you're going to have ways of affording that, funding that. You're going to have early forms of tax collecting, record keeping, writing systems. We'll have to keep track of who has what land and under what circumstances. If you you die, does your land stay in the family? Do you pass it on to your descendants? Does it go to somebody else? Who keeps track? Currencies, early forms of money. Coin money is going to come out of the first civilization. Political institutions are going to emerge. Groups of people that manage the society. Things like war chiefs, successful people in battle. This really successful warrior went out and conquered a bunch of new land. And then they gave that new land and all of the spoils of that land to their supporters. And they built themselves into the first kings or emperors. And they form what are called dynasties, where you can pass that land and conquest on to your descendants. Religious beliefs. Life is going to be increasingly complex in these civilizations. There's going to be all sorts of new traumas and rituals and practices. So you're going to see the emergence of a priest class. There's going to be things like temple construction and religious belief. People are going to try to make sense of these ideas and traumas, like how do you deal with death? How do you deal with rituals in different stages of life or the changing of the seasons? So the first religious belief systems are going to become formalized during this time period. Where do the first civilizations emerge? I'm going to list off 4 locations for you here, and all I want you to do is just to jot them down, and it'll move pretty quick. They happen in 4 places. This is just to give you a map visual, but I'm going to list them off here in the next slide. The first location is going to be here in orange in Mesopotamia. You're going to see clusters of settlements and early civilizations emerge in the Tigris and Euphrates River, which would be like modern-day Iraq right here. You're going to have also civilizations emerging, which your assignment talks about, in the Indus River Valley, concurrently with Mesopotamia, where you're going to have settlements in modern-day India and Pakistan. Those countries don't exist yet, but back then there were people living in that area. In Egypt, in the Nile River Delta, and in East Asia, what would be modern-day China, in the Yellow River Valley. These locations are where you see the first human societies that we could qualify as civilizations. The first is Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. The next is the Indus Valley, which your assignment talks about, which you're reading about in that document 1 and 2. Egypt. And China. Again, not the country China today, but the kind of geographic location we associate with China, East Asia. So, final slide here. But I want you to kind of think about this transition to civilization in maybe a different way. There's a temptation that when we think of civilization, we think, advancement, improvement, stability, a lot of kind of positive thoughts. And to be sure that's true, civilization transforms how people live. In the long run, it delivers all the benefits we're enjoying today, technologically, materially, and so on. But I want to pose this question. What did people give up by creating civilizations, by abandoning those old hunter and gatherer styles of living? Well, I'm going to present some downsides to you. The first civilizations see a massive increase in social inequality, a big divide between rich and poor. If you think about it, a hunter-gatherer society is small, it's self-contained, it moves together. It has to share resources in a really cooperative, fair way. You can't see a small group pull away from the rest because they're so interwoven and dependent upon one another. But once you switch to agriculture, small numbers of people can control large amounts of land and resources, and they can use that power over others in the society. It even gets more dramatic when you have standing armies and conquerors and war chiefs. More violence, conflict over land. If land is the most valuable thing in civilization, human groups are going to fight over it. New diseases are going to emerge in civilization. In a hunter-gatherer type scenario, people move from place to place. They don't settle. They don't cluster in small groups. They don't have domesticated animals. But the first civilizations, they're going to not only farm, they're going to bring animals into their close quarters. They're going to live closely with one another in dense living arrangements. And they're going to be exposed to new bacteria and pathogens that will make them sick. And maybe their bodies don't have immunity to it. So you're going to see a lot of people dealing with disease in early civilization. But some clear upshots to this, upsides, pros, if you will. Surplus food production. There is no denying that. Civilization allows for the maximization of food production that will far outstrip anything that a hunter-gatherer civilization would be able to produce. The grain can get harvested from the fields. It can be brought into the mills and silos and feed people for long periods of time. You get a wider variety of goods, new tools made out of metal, not just stone and wood anymore. Better tools that can accomplish different tasks. Weapons can be developed. And then finally, and I think this is the most important, we may not think about this, but at the time it has a big impact. The accumulation and the preservation of knowledge. You can now write stuff down. You're not just hostage to whoever happens to be in charge at the moment, but with information written down and kept track of, you can pass on information to later generations. And that's going to allow people to develop in a big way. So here's the final thing I want to close with for you for small group on Monday. There's a challenge. Consider all of the information we just explored relating to the transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture to civilization. Here's your task to bring to small group. You're going to have a moment here to get started. Compose a brief tweet with at least one clever hashtag on whether or not you think adopting civilization was a good idea. Was it a good idea to go from being hunters and gatherers to people who live in a civilization? Is that a good move? Or was it a bad move? Think about it. We've looked at all sides of the question. Be prepared, however, to share your tweet